Changes to come in the aviation sector following last week's tragic plane crash.
Will new jobs created by the Baha Mar Resort be enough to keep the unemployment rate down? The Minister of Labour doesn't seem to think so. We've got more on that straight ahead.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquim. Topping news tonight, 2 men were killed on Cowpen Road this afternoon in a police-involved shooting. Authorities say both men were on bail for serious offenses and one of them was being electronically monitored. An investigation has been launched into the matter. Georgia Bain has the details.
Assistant Commissioner of Police Clayton Fernando gave brief details to the media on the scene this afternoon, but according to preliminary reports, police were in fear of their lives when they returned fire.
Shortly after 2 p.m. this afternoon, acting on information, officers responded to this general area of Cowpen Road where they saw a suspicious vehicle. 2 male occupants on scene. The police exit armed with handguns and engage the officers. Officers being in fear for their lives and persons in the general area return fire. Both male occupants were fatally shot.
Fernando says both men were known to police. One of them was even being electronically monitored by authorities. They were on bail for serious offenses, including murder and attempted murder.
Both male victims appear to be in their mid-30s. They are known to the police.
Is there anything else you want to share?
That's pretty much it.
Can you tell us what kind of weapons they had on them?
Yes, 2 weapons, 2 firearms, illegal firearms, was recovered from the male occupants.
Police are asking members of the public to continue to keep officers in their prayers as they work diligently to keep the streets safe.
We are conducting investigation. Madam Coroner has already visited and she was briefed. The matter is now in the hands of the coroners who will continue the investigations. I just want to ensure the members of the public that their police officers, their Royal Bahamas Police Force is up and about in the communities just to ensure that they are safe. The Bahamian people and visitors alike are safe. We just want them to continue to pray for us.
Following multiple aviation mishaps, including last week's deadly Andrews crash, the cabinet minister responsible for oversight is labeling the charter sector slack and rogue, while another cabinet minister, Jeff Lloyd, is calling for stricter regulations. Tourism and Aviation Minister Dionysio de Aguilar is promising a crackdown that will likely be met by backlash. Jasmine Brown reports.
Slack was just one of the words Lloyd used to describe the sector. As de Aguilar says, this administration has the political will to mash some toes when it comes to regulating the sector.
This charter business, as we know it has become, it's just simply out of control. Stop allowing slackness and indiscipline and this unregulated culture that we have had here in these last 50 or more years of our country to continue to, run amok of the best, the highest aspirations of our Bahamian people.
Lloyd did not hold back as he called last week's plane crash that killed 6 people a tragedy. Just yesterday, Chief Investigator of the Air Accident Investigation Department, Delvin Major, confirmed that Darren Clark, the pilot of the 6-seater aircraft that crashed in shallow waters near Mastic Point, was not licensed to operate commercial flights, nor did he have the required ratings to operate the Piper aircraft in visually impairing weather conditions. Lloyd says not only does last week's deadly incident highlight an industry that is out of control, he says it also proves it's poorly regulated as it has been allowed to function under rogue circumstances.
The unfortunate thing is that when we delay, people's lives are placed at risk. And not only at risk, but, may end up in tragedy. So we don't have, any time to, pander to egos and territoriality in the minds and the hearts of our Bahamian people. This must be a society of discipline and order and respect, regulation, and commitment. And let's have that done across the board. And, whose toes get mashed or, whose egos get, assaulted, then too bad.
The aviation minister agreed with Lloyd's assessment of the sector.
The fact that the word hacker is so much a part of our conversation when we discuss aviation in this country leads me to believe that we've got a serious problem.
D'Aguilar says despite what has happened in the past, this government has the political will to address the issue.
I'm immersing myself in it, learning at why every time I ask people why we haven't corrected this problem, they keep saying that there's not the political will. So I want to indicate to the Bahamian people there is now the political will. I've asked the Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority to prepare a minute paper on how do we clamp down on this. How do we ensure that people do not fly who should not be flying, should not be transporting passengers.
Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
In other news, Labor Minister Dion Folk says the assertion that the upcoming labor force survey will reflect an increase in joblessness is accurate. This after Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquest told the National Guardian that the initial unemployment numbers will reflect an increase. Jared Higgs tells us that the Labor Minister is hoping that the country's labor statistics will improve by the end of the year.
Minister of Labour Dion Fawkes isn't shying away from the possibility that jobs for Bahamians are on the decline. Temporary jobs during the election and Carnival, as well as jobs added by Bahamar, couldn't sustain a Bahamian labour force already desperate for employment. Since coming to office, the Minister administration has sent home public servants from various government entities, a move slammed by opposition leader Philip Davis. Folks responded to claims by Davis, who accused the new government of not having a plan to increase jobs, as well as terminating vulnerable public servants.
All of the persons, to my knowledge, who have been not working in the public sector, their contracts came to an end. Like, for example, we have some of the 52-week persons who were employed in that program. The 52 weeks came to an end. So it was the terms of that contract. Now, we do not want to let anybody go because Bahamians are suffering. There is a lot of people are having problems paying their bills, and we want to keep people employed. But if you sign a contract for a specific time and the contract comes to an end, that is the end of the contract.
For his part, Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquest says the Minister administration had to do some significant rationalization with respect to the public sector, particularly what he called bogus contracts that Davis and the PLP would have been responsible for. He added that those contracts drive up the cost to government and increase the country's deficit.
But we are hopeful that this year, when the reports come out during the summer, that you will see an increase. Bahamar is taking on some additional 2,000 persons based on what they've already done.
Both Turnquest and Folk say that the phased opening of the Bahamar Resort has resulted in the creation of thousands of jobs, and they expect 1,000 more jobs to be created when the Rosewood Hotel opens later this spring.
Also, Grand Bahama is going to experience a drastic increase in employment as a result of what we are doing at our Lucaya hotels and 2 other major projects in Grand Bahama. So we are optimistic that when the reports come out towards the end of the year, I think it will be around maybe October, November, that you will see a decrease in unemployment throughout the country.
Folks added that there are some bright spots on the Family Islands, including Exuma and Abaco, which he says have practically full employment. In the meantime, Turnquest says they need the private sector to absorb some of the employment needs. Reporting for our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
Well, Progressive Liberal Party Chairman Fred Mitchell calling it ridiculous that the Deputy Prime Minister would predict a rise in unemployment and blame it on the previous government more than 8 months since the FNM has been in power.
He ought to be ashamed of himself to say that a government deliberately increases unemployment. Outrageous.
Mitchell was responding to the finance minister who attributed a projected rise in unemployment to what Turnquest called artificial employment and bogus contracts under the previous administration. The former cabinet minister accounted for every single job under the previous government, including those who may have been hired just before the May 10th general election.
Every job that someone was hired for in the public service, they had a specific job to do.
The PLB chairman referenced a shortage of janitors and people to clean public parks.
Look at the state of the public parks and the verges. That is because of supposedly these bogus contracts have been cut out, but the net result is the place is filthy. So there's clearly a demand for the work, and it's only the public sector that can provide the work.
Now, when it comes to Baha Mar and the government's expectation of job growth from the resort in the very near future, Mitchell calls it ironic that Dr. Minnis and his administration would seek to hang their hat on the success of a development they blasted while in opposition.
They would not have any claim for jobs in the private sector had it not been for Baha Mar, which is a PLP project that they tried their best to scuttle. They tried their best to destroy it, to say it was fake, it was false, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, they're all standing up in front of the hotel cutting ribbons and claiming about employment in the private sector. So many deceits, so much fiction.
Mitchell also took issue with the Deputy Prime Minister's assertion that while there may be an increase in the unemployment rate in the next jobs report, government needs the private sector to absorb some of it. According to the PLP chairman, it doesn't necessarily work that way.
There are going to be all kinds of knock-on effects when you start decreasing employment. We knew that. We knew that you have to drive consumer spending. You have to spend your way out of recession. You can't contract the economy. And when the government starts contracting the economy, the private sector starts contracting as well.
Minister of Tourism Dionisio de Aguilar today downplayed that crime warning that was issued by the Canadian government. The tourism minister says he believes that the Bahamas is too hard on itself when it comes to crime. He said while there is crime in the Bahamas, there are no acts of terrorism.
But you know what we don't have here? I can walk down the street here, I can go shopping, I can go to any tourist attraction, and I don't have to worry about a terrorist. Ain't nobody gonna come here and blow us up. Or we don't have people like in the United States that come out and shoot out 50, 60, 70 people because they have the right to bear an arm. This destination, we have to start talking about what's good about this destination.
De Aguilar was responding to questions posed about the Canada crime warning that was issued on the Canadian government's website on Friday. The Canadian government warned its citizens to exercise a high degree of caution when traveling to the Bahamas due to high rates of crime, including a purported increase of sexual assaults against tourists. The Canadian warning follows a recent U.S. State Department travel advisory that warned its citizens to exercise extreme caution when visiting the Bahamas.
This destination, we have to start talking about what's good about this destination and not always sensationalizing the one crime event here or the one crime event there. I think we tend to linger on it too long, and we're hurting ourselves. Jamaica has a far worse crime situation. Mexico has a far worse crime situation. You don't see them issuing warnings about them.
He added that despite what some may think, the majority of visitors will not become victims of crime.
May I remind the public that 6.3 million foreign visitors come to our country each and every year. And yes, there are going to be a number of them that are victims of crime. But you know what? When I go to London, when I go to Paris, when I go to New York, I probably have just the same likelihood of being a victim of crime.
In his quest to establish Grand Bahama as a world-renowned technology hub, the Prime Minister sought to persuade tech giants in the United States to invest in the island whose economy has limped along for more than a decade. While addressing members of the Austin Technology Council and the Texas Association of Business in Texas on Monday, Dr. Hubert Minnis asserted that now is the time to invest in the Bahamas. He pointed to the controversial Commercial Enterprises Act, which seeks to liberalize the granting of work permits to an enterprise that wishes to establish itself in the Bahamas.
Legislation has been passed in our Commercial Enterprise Act, which will streamline business applications and immigration processes in order to facilitate new technology businesses.
Minnis invited those in attendance to consider Grand Bahama for their next startup or business expansion, noting the island is uniquely suited to become an internationally recognized science, technology, and innovation hub.
Freeport, Grand Bahama, has great promise as a digital center. Our nation's second city has superb communications infrastructure. So you are always connected. Freeport houses the island's highest reliable power company, and my government prioritizes maintaining close relations with our service providers. And I am pleased to say that the Grand Bahama Power Company has expressed its preparedness to be flexible in rates particularly for new technology companies.
Still to come on our news, the long-awaited policing plan to be tabled next week. Stay tuned.